Hi, good afternoon, and very good afternoon. How are you guys? I hope you guys are doing great, doing fine. Well, we have these three cameras, and just like to give you guys my input. These are all three mirrorless cameras from three different categories. So, just want to quickly give you my input how these three cameras are made and which category is for you. Starting with Z5. I have Z5 with me, given by Nikon Middle East. Thank you so much for that. Then I have Z6. Okay, so that's Z6. That's oh yep, that's a Z6 that you can see. And then I was fortunate enough to given me the Z7II. So I have like Z5, I have Z6, and I have Z7II. These are three different cameras for three different categories of photography. Like, okay, you're probably saying, well, Z5 and Z6 both are 24 megapixel cameras, all right? Which is right. Like these two are 24 megapixel, Z5 and Z6. These two are 24 megapixel cameras, but they are two different animals. They are two different uh, market to go for. Like for example, you can make 4K video from Z6 or Z6II, superior autofocus, stuff like that, photography, BSI sensor, 10 frames per second, stuff like that for Z6. Z5, it's slow. It's 4.5 frames per second. It's also 25 megapixel, but it's not the BSI sensor. It means that it's a conventional sensor. The sensor readout is slow. That's why it's 4.5 frames per second. Then we have the beast, which is Z7II. By the way, the autofocus on Z7II is really great. I shot like more than 1100 frames. This was given to me 0 meter. So when I opened it, I was the first guy who used this. I shot 1100 frames, around 80 GB of data, and this thing it's really good. I really pushed the dynamic range and ISO performance of this camera Z7II, and it's surprisingly just like I was using D850, actually a little here better than that when it comes to ISO recovery and dynamic range, a little bit. I believe that's because of the uh, SNR firmware of the camera, but this is really good stuff. Especially the shadow recovery on Z7II, it's amazing. Now you probably say, okay, this is an expensive machine, okay, which it is. It's expensive machine, so that's why the Z5 and Z6 comes into the picture. Like for example, Z6 is for video. If you are into video, then you have to go for Z6 because that's the machine for go for 4K 60p is going to be there. With 30p or 24p, it's already in the market, it's already available, and the Z6II as well. The autofocus on the Z6II, I believe it's the same, just like Z7II. I used the box and tracking of all these, which was perfectly fine. Perfectly fine. But I highly recommend, if you are only into photography and you don't want to invest too much into the mirrorless because you don't know how you're gonna feel or how stuff like that, that's where the Z5 is, I believe, is the ultimate. It's really the ultimate camera, the best deal that you can go with Z5. Why? Because first of all, two card slots. Okay, you have two cards. Okay, so the data backup is there. 24 megapixel, more than enough if you're shooting the landscape, portrait, street photography, even the long exposures up to 30 seconds, you can do it perfectly fine. Nothing wrong in that. Like for pure photography purpose, Z5 is still, in my opinion, the best entry level full frame camera, which gives you the same level of dynamic range, the same level of ISO performance like this Z6. Z6, in my opinion, is not much difference than Z5, honestly speaking. The only thing where the Z6 shines is the high frames per second. Z6 or Z6II, high frames per second. Also the low light autofocus tracking and locking. That's where Z6 shines. Z5 is lagging behind in terms of autofocus locking in low light. That's where Z6 shines. If you are all the time shooting in low light, you may find, by the way, it highly depends on the lens that you are using. Okay, you cannot compare the autofocus performance just only based on the camera body's autofocus system. No, it also depends on the lens that you are using. So I use the same lens which was 85 1.8 S native for the Z-mount on both Z6 and also on Z5, and I was shooting mostly with Z5, and I didn't find any issue at all in locking the focus in low light. I didn't find any issue. It may vary depending on the lens that you are using, so that keep that in mind. All right, so the basic difference between Z5 and Z6 is the iframes per second, the nearly identical ISO performance, nearly identical ISO, dynamic range, and what else? There is one more thing. The file size on Z5 is small. The raw file is around less than 25 megabyte, one raw file, whereas the same 24 megapixel and Z6 is around 46 MB. Why is the difference? Both are 24 megapixels. Why there is a difference? The thing is, Z5 by default comes with a compressed raw file. So if you are using a 64 GB card in any of these cameras, you will get more shots in Z5 rather than on Z6, because the Z5 raw files are compressed by default. There are only two options: compressed or lossless compressed. Whereas in Z6 you have lossless compressed, compressed, uncompressed. So if you go for uncompressed raw file, it will stretch to 44 megabyte per raw file. Whereas in Z5 is by default compressed. You cannot choose uncompressed raw file. That's where you may think that it's a compressed raw file, so I may not able to get the superior image quality with Nikon's offer. No. That's completely inappropriate statement in my view, because when I compare these both together, I found there is no difference in dynamic range, nearly no difference in dynamic range between Z5 and Z6. Nothing. They are the same. They are the same almost. The only difference, the frames per second, and also the card capacity, the number of shots that you can get from Z5 are more than Z6. But for video, that's completely different story. When it comes to video, Z6 shines big time. Z5 cannot catch it. But for photography, simple, still photography. Trust me, I was using Z5 so much that I have zero issues. Like, if I wouldn't have that Z6 belongs to me. Z5 and Z7II belongs to Nikon Middle East. Thank you for that. They just give me so I can go out, test it, do the comparison and stuff like that. So I was using all these three cameras for around a week or 2 weeks. Z5 is with me for more than 2 weeks, 3 weeks actually. Z7II is with me for almost a week, and I was shooting this Z6 for portrait, morning, landscapes, and all type of photos which I can probably which I can take. And after shooting 1100 frames, I can tell you Z7II. Okay, let me try to put in this way what Z7II is. First of all, it's you have to decide what type of photography you do. If you are totally in landscape, all three cameras, Z7II shines because you have 46 megapixels. You have more pixels to crop and all those things. Okay, this is also, Z5 is also going to work. Z6 is also going to work for landscape. Portrait, all three will work for portrait. But when it comes to low light shooting, low light shooting, and you have to only depending on the ambience, that's where Z5 and Z6 shines straight away. Z7 you will start getting noise after 1600 ISO. At 1600 ISO, this Z5 didn't even sweat. Like, I was surprised. Like 4000 ISO, 6000 ISO, 5000 ISO, this thing was running. There was no noise in. There was no noise in Z5. And I was like, seriously? I thought it may differ. It may like slow down a bit when it comes to ISO performance or dynamic range in compared to Z6. No, it didn't. Z5 still outperformed many other cameras which I was not expecting. I'm not kidding. I have the images which I already uploaded, and I have high ISO shots with me. I covered the whole exposure event with Z5, whole event, and I was shooting in the low light scenario 6000 ISO, 8000 ISO, 12800 ISO, and the raw files was like crazy. There was no noise at all. In Z5, I covered 4-5 days event of exposure with Z5 only. So, but I cannot get the same level of ISO performance with Z7II. Z7II is because the pixels are very much small. We are talking about 46 megapixel. When the pixels are small, there are lack of gain. When there is a lack of gain, you will get noise. I don't want to go much more technical in this right now, but this Z7II, it's ideal for landscapers, portraiture, if you are shooting at low ISOs. Alright, studio work, product photography, architecture photography, long exposures. This thing is a killer, literally, for long exposure. And also for landscapers, it's an ideal machine because in Z7II you can go up to 900-second exposure. 900-second exposure, that's around 15 minutes. So you can go up to 15 minutes of one single shot using this machine. You don't have to put any cable or anything. It goes by itself. So that's one of the best part that I see. That's not that long exposure 900-second feature is not present in Z5, neither in Z6. In Z6II it is present, but for me it's fine. I don't go up to 900 seconds, so Z6 is fine for me. But again, low light autofocus locking is highly depend on the lens. So don't blame on the camera. Oh, it's not locking. No, it depends on the lens that you are using. For me, these all three cameras work perfectly. It's you have to decide. If you are shooting landscape, all three cameras will work. If you are shooting portrait, all three cameras will work. But for the low light portraiture in ambient, like people call natural light portraiture, that's where Z5 and Z6 shines. Z7, you will start getting noise after 1600 ISO. Alright. Architecture photography, all three will work. Street photography, Z5 is a killer. Why Z5? Why? Because in street photography, you are waiting for the shots. You are taking multiple shots. And with the same number size of memory card, you will get more shots in Z5. You will get 2 cards backup and you can work perfectly for street photography. Z6 or Z6II, it also going to work. It's not like that. But again, it's up to you. This is cheap camera. Way cheap. Perform nearly identical. But if you are shooting sports action, wildlife, that's where it's not going to work. Not at all. Not at all. That's where you need Z6. Only Z6 can cater the sports action wildlife category. But also it depends on the lens, by the way. Okay. Z7II, I pushed that into wildlife category, and the buffer was getting full much quickly because of the bigger file size, and I was getting noise because I was pushing the shutter speed up to 2000 in low light, trying to capture the birds, start getting noise. So, but again, it's up to you what is your workflow. Maybe you are okay with high ISO, you can reduce into post processing. For me, I still prefer Z6 or Z6II for shooting wildlife action sports because I'll get more frames per second. 24 megapixel is enough for cropping, and I use longer lenses, so I don't need to crop much because my lens can reach up to that level where people depending on the cropping I have lens so I can cover that area, but people don't have long lenses like 400, 500. That's where they are depending on croppability. That's where they need more megapixel, which is fine. It depends on what is your workflow. So that's my quick input about Z7II, Z5 and Z6. For me, the all-rounder which you can depend blindly and go with it, it's Z6 or Z6II. You can blindly depend on this camera and do any kind of shoot, landscape, portraiture, sports, action, wildlife, product photography, street photography, wedding photography. That camera is awesome. For wedding, Z5, awesome camera for wedding. Because you are capturing the moments. You don't need high frames per second, but you do need high ISO performance. That's where this camera shines. And because of the raw file are compressed, so you can get more frames in the single card, which you cannot get in this one. You can get in Z6. Maybe some people don't know to select the option of the compressed raw in Z6. This by default comes with compressed raw files, so you can easily go more shots in this. And Z7, well, that's the best of the best of the best. I mean, what can I say? For sports, not for sport, for landscape, portraiture, product photography, and where you don't depend on the speed, you don't depend on the movement of the subjects, that's where Z7 shines. And I was shooting mostly on low ISO because it's 46 megapixel. After 1600 ISO, it's not worth. That's where Z6 or Z6II comes in, or Z5. So that's my overall input about the Z7, Z6 and Z5. Thank you very much, and I'll see you guys some other time.